Alright boys, here we go. This is North Carolina Hare Scramble Association Round 2 at Windy Hill. I made a mistake and skipped the Enola race for Mid-East, thinking that it was going to be muddy, and I don't know what I was thinking, because this was insane, and way worse than all the pictures and stuff I saw from the Enola race. I get a horrible start. I'm running Sportsman in the morning just so I don't have to worry about points or anything. It's kind of just doing it for fun because I wanted to get out and race. But I get a really bad start and end up dead last out of the last row of the morning race. So I'm in the very back of everybody who's there. This course starts out on a motocross track, and my motocross career is short and embarrassing, so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in a second just to get away from all this flailing I do out on a motocross course. You can see the standing water. This is all sand and that black loamy dirt. I ran this course last year and it was a lot of fun. It was a really good course. There's a couple mud spots in the lower sections, and I expected that again because it kind of runs into a swamp. And I don't know why I didn't just think, man, it's gonna be filthy, so why not go higher elevation where the Enola race was, and then come back to and not skip this completely. But instead I decided I was going to go do this, which turned into this nasty, muddy, rooty mess just way early into the race. This is us going into the woods. You see the ruts are already starting to develop really bad. This is second lap, so everything that's beat in here is just worse, 100% worse by the fourth lap, which is the last lap we did. And in the morning, they don't circumnavigate any of the big mud spots. You run everything. So the afternoon got away a little bit. They run a little shorter time. And I was looking at some of the other times. The times for the afternoon race were longer, but overall, I think the leaders of the afternoon only did 2 to 4 laps, which the leaders of this race did 5 and 6 laps in the morning. You can see in the second lap, there's already people pointing you into the directions you need to go. And the ground was so strange. There was all this area where they looked like they had been clear cutting or underbrush cutting, and then this is all still second lap. You can just see everything just getting torn to pieces. It was this black loamy dirt and sand, and then there were some of these sections where the ground was so saturated that once you get through the topsoil section, you get into that red clay that's down on the bottom of the next level of sediment, and even that was so wet it was getting displaced, so you'd hit it and it would just suck up all your speed. There's sections in this where you just hit up I don't know what it was, just a suck, and it would stick you and bring you to a complete stop. The trail went from being a single track, like one bike wide trail, because NCHSA doesn't do any ATVs or side-by-sides, so these trails are always a little shorter but a little tighter, and by the end of this race the whole thing was just blown out wide. These bridges are something that kind of sets Windy Hill apart. The sections with the bridges are the nasty sections, and then in a race where everything else is nasty, the bridge sections are just going to be worse. So thankfully this time the bridges didn't get really destroyed like they did last year, and they had this chain link over them, so it made it more passable and less like riding on ice. The sections that were up a little higher, that were not so, they didn't just collect water like that section. They were actually okay. There was some, not dust, but it was just grip, and it had good flow to it, and it wasn't a bad course overall for the layout, but just the conditions were just horrible. And this is still second lap, and people are already getting their bikes buried up to their motors, and then there's these tank deep ruts everywhere. And I'm not the most confident mud rider, so my riding speed is significantly slower than I feel like it would have been otherwise. Even though my lap times pretty much showed that I was riding at pace for, I guess, where else I would have been. But it's just, it was so hard to have any kind of confidence about you when you come up on stuff like this. Look at this shithole. These are two AA or pro guys that come by me, and then just look at this. They just blast into it like there's nothing going on, but it's like, when I went to go wash my bike, it was like washing concrete off of it. It was horrible. So, I don't know. I made a big mistake by not going to the Mid-East race. And this race was challenging, but at a whole different level of challenging because of the mud and the conditions. Sections, like I said before, where there were these like clear-cut, undercut sections that were just like, I don't know what they've been doing, like clear cutting or underbrush cutting, and there were these sticks everywhere. Like they'd cut all the limbs off of trees and then just kind of left them laying around. And that provided, and there were also stumps. There were a lot of low-cut stumps everywhere, which managed to destroy parts of my bike. This section I leave in because it was weird. In the last race when I did this course, that section was more challenging than it is now. We ran this course backwards this time from the previous time we'd run it. That section that I just put in was like a lattice work of tree roots. And before you'd hit it, it was like one of the more challenging sections of this race. By this time, I was so glad to hit something that wasn't just sopping wet and thick mud that it was relieving. Also, there were some sections that like you can see that this is just sand in that black loamy dirt. And the sections like this were fun, but you had to be a little wary because it looks like it's dry and you could really get on the gas, and then when you start to get on the gas, you run into some section that's just these big nasty ruts or big puddles of mud or just something that was not unforeseen, just unexpected. And so I was always wary of really coming into these things hard. This is one of these sections where there would be like a root, and that's what happened to my expansion chamber on my bike. It wasn't new, it already had a dent in it, but I hit one of these stumps and just trying to take a hot line around the mud and just obliterated my expansion chamber. And I thought, man, I could pull it out and probably blow it back out, but it's gone. It's pushed all the way back into my frame and smashed flat, so I'm just throw it out and use another one. You can see how single-lined everything was in the sections that weren't just filthy, nasty mud, and then they would just blow out when you got to the filthy, nasty mud sections because everybody was trying to get around them with a minimal amount of getting stuck. And remarkably, in this entire race, I only really got stuck twice, even though I made some bad line choices like here where I was, just jumped my bike into the deepest hole I could find. But I only really got stuck twice, and then one of them was on my last lap, and I saw a guy come through, and he was so stuck on the last lap that he had just gotten off his bike and left it standing in the middle of the mud. It was the whole course, too. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, he's complaining because there's one section of mud. It was the whole freaking course. I can think that, just go through one section and there's usually one big mud hole in every race. And whatever, okay, that's fine. But, the entire 7-mile course was just this concrete mud. As the race got longer, went farther in, every line just got destroyed. And so it just pushed the trail wider and wider and wider. All the popular lines got completely blown out. I don't understand. I did better in this race with how I usually ride mud, but I don't understand how like a pro guy can come into something like this and just continue to blast through. Even momentum at some point can't help you because it's just you're gonna be overcome by the suction and just the conditions, but you can still do it. This is one of the sections I get stuck. I was following the other guy's line and just didn't carry enough momentum into this hole. And it wasn't much of a stick. I just kind of bogged my bike down and then got to get situated again and jump myself out of this hole. Looking for my Kickstarter because I couldn't find it because everything's the same color and it's covered in concrete. I leave this section in because I like this a lot. It was like a ladder bridge for a mountain bike. It was all covered in chain link, but it was still slick as hell. And you know that if they put a ladder bridge over all that stuff, that's got to be some deep soup. It's gonna be deep soup. It's gonna be terrible. So at the beginning of the race, the guy said, if there's a bridge, don't go off the bridge because everything around it is just going to be deeper than everything else. In another video previously, I had said that when you start seeing spectators, you know that something interesting is going to happen because the spectators only show up to the parts where there's going to be some carnage. So, talk about how slow a ride this was for me. This section was the worst because I was trying to make sure I didn't get stuck, and you could just sit and spin with your bike, pushing forward, both feet off, just kind of pedaling forward, and still never make it through some of this stuff. I watched guys get stuck. This is another log chain link fence that they put in the middle of all of this, which I don't understand why they put it there. It must have been worse than everything else. But the spectators in this area of the course were actually cutting logs and making like overpasses for sections that were too muddy, like right here. That wasn't there at the beginning of the race. The first lap, that wasn't there. The spectators put that in. And it was because people were getting stuck. And these guys pointing out, because look at all the stuff to the right. It's just, how do you get through that? You would just be stuck there forever. And like at the beginning of this race, I said I wasn't there to be, you know, show off or try and, I'm not racing for points in this group, so I'm just kind of out riding. I was still trying, and I was still trying to see how well I could do in the sportsman class. But at some point, it just becomes kind of a survival race where I was like, I think I may, if I had to do, I don't want to say I would have quit, but it crossed my mind a couple times because I thought, I'm just destroying my bike being out here doing this stuff, and I still haven't really gotten a chance to go look over it to make sure that nothing is destroyed. You know, this is pretty common. You see somebody who had gotten into a rut, and it was either a bike swallower or it was something where they had gotten just completely sidetracked and side-rutted. This section right here was later on terrible, and this is in the third lap or fourth lap, and you can just see the same line and completely stuck. And you see how deep it is. It's not insane, like my bike's not buried up to the handlebars, but that's enough to completely, without enough momentum to completely stop you. And I think this part of the video is from third lap, that part of the video is from third lap, and then the fourth lap coming up, because this is close to the finish. In the fourth lap, I just saw there was a guy just sitting there, and he was so stuck he couldn't get out. And it was probably, you know, 6 inches deeper than it was when I had been there, because I had spun in that hole trying to get out until I could generate enough friction to get myself forward. I'm glad I didn't switch over to my other tire, though. I was going to put my Shinko tire back on because the Enola race from Mid-East was supposed to be more rocky and hilly, so I thought the softer compound, you know, crossover tire would have been a better selection. And I'm kind of glad that I hadn't swapped it because I had the AT81 on the back of this tire, which was significantly better for the mud. This is another faster section. This is coming up towards scoring. This is a faster section, but then there were these, what I talked about before, where you come out and you can carry some speed, but then you're just going to hit these big rut, I don't know what they were called, just these big sections where there were these standing water pools, and you would hit them and they would just become ruts, fields of ruts. And then no matter how wide out you went, they were just, you know, slick or just speed sucking, and you would get stuck. And so I kind of mitigated how much speed I was carrying into some of these field sections because I wasn't gonna I didn't want to like be hauling into it, get crossed, and just get thrown into the field, because that was something that was a real possibility because of how loose everything was. Now, if the whole course would have been like this, I would have been happy, but it wasn't. It was that mud and just slop the whole time. This is coming up into scoring in the third lap. I ended up in 2nd out of 7th in Sportsman. Did okay, I guess, but it was just a shit race. I made a mistake not going to the Mid-East race, and I'll stick with my guts next time and go to the Mid-East race instead, even if it is going to be worse conditions, or seemingly worse conditions.